Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Rehan Morsi, and if you're watching the show for the very first time, let me reintroduce you to what the show is all about. The show is composed of a number of different segments. First, we take a closer look at the world of politics. Next comes business and finance, and then we learn more about what's happening in the world of technology and the latest in the world of culture and arts. Then finally, we end the show with a sports segment. First, we're going to start off with a political segment after the break. Starting off with Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry praising the ties between Cairo and Athens on all levels. Shoukry was speaking at a joint press conference in Athens with Greece's foreign minister. He said both sides are keen to implement joint projects. Shoukry also said Cairo appreciates Greece's role in boosting Egypt within the EU mechanisms, saying his consultations with the Greek foreign minister touched on the Palestinian issue and regional developments. For his part, the Greek foreign minister expressed appreciation for ties with Cairo. Shoukry's visit to the Greek capital aims to boost bilateral relations and to hold consultations on regional and international developments. Shoukry will also meet with the CEO of a Greek company called Koplozos for electricity to review the progress of the implementation of the electricity interconnection project between Egypt and Greece. The foreign minister's visit is over bilateral relations and regional developments. Israeli occupation forces intensified military measures in Old Jerusalem, preventing Palestinian youth from entering Al-Aqsa Mosque to perform dawn prayers. Meanwhile, scores of settlers stormed into Al-Aqsa Mosque halls in the sixth day of the Jewish Passover feast. The settlers' break-ins were carried out in groups from the mosque's gates amid tight security by police occupational forces. The Islamic Waqf Directorate in occupied Jerusalem said the settlers carried out provocative tours inside the mosque halls, performing their Talmudic rituals. Still on the Palestinian file, delivering an Easter Mass in the Vatican on Sunday, Pope Francis noted his deep concern over a flare-up in tensions between Israel and Palestinians. The Pope called for the resumption of dialogue to ensure peace in the holy city of Jerusalem and in this entire region, addressing a Catholic gathering of around 100,000 people in St. Peter's Square. The Argentine pontiff, a week after leaving hospital, also cited a string of stumbling blocks to peace in the world during his traditional Easter message, making special mention of the war in Ukraine. Pope Francis drew attention to conflicts around the world from Syria to the Democratic Republic of Congo and offered prayers to victims of the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. Still on the Palestinian-Israeli flare-up, the EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell on Saturday condemned the escalating violence between the Israelis and Palestinians, urging all parties to exercise restraint and promote calm for the ongoing religious holiday. Israeli-Palestinian tensions mounted after an Italian tourist was killed and 5 people wounded in a car ramming in Tel Aviv on Friday. Borrell said in a statement the EU calls for an immediate end to the ongoing violence, stressing that everything must be done to prevent the conflict from spreading, to avoid further escalation and promote calm for the ongoing holidays. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ahmed Abu Zaid said on Friday that Egypt was gravely worried about the dangerous escalations witnessed in the region over the past 48 hours. The remarks came in the wake of continued break-ins in Al-Aqsa Mosque by Israeli occupation forces and the repeated assaults on Muslim worshippers. The move was followed by Israeli strikes targeting the Gaza Strip and southern Lebanon. The spokesman called on all parties to practice self-restraint and respond to the ongoing efforts and restore peace and calm in the region. Joining us over the phone to tell us more about what's happening in the region is Dr. Sharif Amir, a political analyst. Good evening to you, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear very well.
Sir, can you tell us how do you read what's happening right now in the occupied Palestinian territories?
Well, it is sad to see that during the month of Ramadan and the Holy Week for the Christians, the Eastern Orthodox Christians, and also the Passover for the Jewish people, that the holy city of Jerusalem is living these tense moments. It should be a time of prayer for all the religions there. It should be a time of peace. It should be a time of mutual understanding. What we have seen is political maneuvers. We have seen escalations. We have seen that all the sides are playing according to their own interests. That's why Egypt has a real objective stance, asking everyone to stop immediately the escalation. There is no need for these incursions inside the Temple Mount or the Al-Aqsa Mosque by the Israeli forces. At the same time, there is no need for the Hezbollah or the Hamas to launch any rockets. We need calm. The world is already in a tense situation. The Middle East has suffered a lot. And I repeat, we in Egypt, we understand that these are sacred moments for all the three religions, and we have to respect that. Everyone has to respect it. The Israeli government has to respect it. The factions of the Palestinians should do the same. So I think Egypt is the voice of reason. We are telling everyone, respect these moments and stop the escalations. We are there for mediation as we have done before.
Yes, but sir, we've seen major flare-ups within the Palestinian territories since the beginning of the year, especially in light of a far-right government taking office in Israel. Do you believe that this will affect the negotiation process when it comes to de-escalation? And will we start to see more of this sort of violence and aggression due to the political hold that they have now in the Israeli government?
Well, as you have just said, there is a tense situation inside the Israeli government, which never happened before since the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. And we have seen today or yesterday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, I will give the orders for all the Jews not to go to the Temple Mount. Then he was criticized immediately by his Minister of Internal Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's a hardliner, who said that this will lead to escalation. This would not calm the situation. So that means that things are not settled. We have seen how the demonstrations took place in Israel for weeks to stop the judicial reforms presented by Benjamin Netanyahu, by Itamar Ben-Gvir, by Mr. Smotrich also, who is a disciple of the late Meir Kahane. So we have seen all these people are acting now inside Israel to change the color of Israel, to change Israel to be a Jewish state. So there is a turmoil, historic turmoil. We have to understand that. There is an earthquake inside of Israel. It's not easy. So when you have for the first time such events inside Israel, that means that something big could happen. Anyone could trigger an escalation to make any political gains from the right or from the left. And at the same time, we have seen for the first time also something very special, that when the missiles the rockets were launched from southern Lebanon inside Israel, for the first time the Hezbollah said, it's not us, and we don't want escalation. So first time we have seen that Iran and Hezbollah are backing up and saying we're not in this game. So it's obvious there are changes on the ground. King Abdullah II of Jordan who has the authority on the West Bank and the religious Waqf there, said that we don't accept what's going on in the holy places. We have seen that Saudi Arabia, who had many things to do with the creating a calm in the region lately, as the Emirates are doing, are not satisfied. So it has to be dealt with very accurate and expertise, diplomatic expertise. Egypt is the only country who had this opportunity.
Yes.
So that's why we're calling upon everyone not to act emotionally, not to play any political maneuvers now. Enough harm has been done to all this, to the Palestinians and to everyone, and this has to stop.
Yes, sir. There have been attempts since the beginning of the year to de-escalate the situation and sit back down on the negotiation table, but it seems to have broken down several times. Why do you believe they have not been able to find some sort of middle ground to, I suppose, create ceasefires between them?
Well, first of all, as Egypt said it before, we all said it in the political sphere, the Palestinians should unite. There is no need for a government in Gaza who is not following the President Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen of the legitimate Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. This division has to end, and end immediately. That's harming the Palestinians. But what's very weird now, that apparently in Israel something similar is happening now. They will have two opposite sides. So tell me who could sit with who and talk about what and when. It's not easy now to bring any Israelis to the negotiation table because they are divided. You cannot bring the Palestinians to the negotiation table because they are divided. You have four parties now. You don't have three as before, two Palestinians and one Israeli. We have two Israelis and two Palestinian parties.
So it complicates the matters. Dr. Sharif Amir, a political analyst, thank you so much for joining us over the phone and giving us your insight on what's happening on the ground. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. The United Nations welcomed the ongoing talks in Sana'a between Saudi Omani delegations and Houthis aiming at reaching a political solution for the Yemeni crisis. The talks come as the Saudi ambassador in Yemen, Mohammed Al-Gabir, said that his visit with the Omani delegation to Sana'a to meet Houthi officials aims at reaching reconciliation and boosting the process of exchange of detainees and discussing means of dialogue between Yemeni factions to achieve integral and sustainable political solution in Yemen. Yemen announced on Tuesday that a prisoner exchange involving hundreds of detainees from Yemen's brutal civil war would start on Thursday. A Yemeni government official said nearly 900 prisoners, most of whom were fighting with Houthi rebels, would be flown between Yemen and Saudi Arabia. The official said that the prisoner exchange would last 3 days and involve multiple cities in Yemen and Saudi Arabia. He said all arrangements had been completed to implement the agreed-upon exchange process, adding that the day of the exchange process would be through reciprocal flights of the Red Cross between Aden and Sana'a and Aden. According to an agreement reached last month in Switzerland, the Houthis will release 181 prisoners, including Saudis and Sudanese, in exchange for 760 detainees held by government forces. An Iranian technical delegation will visit Saudi Arabia this week to prepare for the reopening of Iran's embassy in Riyadh. A semi-official Iranian news agency reported the upcoming visit on Sunday, days after the foreign ministers of Iran and Saudi Arabia met in Beijing on Thursday for the first formal gathering of their top diplomats in more than 7 years. The Saudi Foreign Ministry said that on Saturday that officials had visited Iran to discuss procedures of reopening Riyadh's diplomatic missions in the country. Under a historic deal brokered by China last month, the two countries are to reopen their embassies and missions within 2 months and implement security and economic cooperation deals signed more than 20 years ago. The Moscow-appointed leader of Crimea said on Tuesday the region is on guard for what may be an impending Ukrainian counter-offensive. Sergei Askanov said Russian forces in Crimea had built modern, in-depth defenses and had more than enough troops and equipment to repel a possible Ukraine assault after 13 months of war following Russia's full-scale invasion. His comments came days after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reaffirmed Kyiv's intention to take back the Black Sea Peninsula that Russia illegally annexed from Ukraine in 2014. Ukrainian forces could seek to break through the land corridor between Russia and Crimea, heading from Zaporozhye towards Melitopol and Azov Sea, which might split the Russian forces in two. On the ground, Russia used Su-35 aircrafts to launch strikes on 2 towns in Zaporozhye region, while its artillery also hit a church in Kherson. French President Emmanuel Macron began a state visit to the Netherlands on Tuesday due to feature a keenly watched speech in Europe as he battled a furor over his controversial remarks on Europe and China. Macron's speech on European sovereignty comes after the 45-year-old French leader said in an interview that Europe must not be a follower of either Washington or Beijing on Taiwan. The story. Making the first state visit by a French president to the Netherlands for 23 years, French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte were greeted by Dutch King William Alexander and Queen Maxima on their arrival in Amsterdam. The French leader stood to attention alongside them outside the royal palace as a band played the Marseillaise, the French national anthem, before laying a wreath at the Dutch National Monument. All eyes are on Macron's comments on China, which he visited last week. The Élysée Palace insisted Tuesday that the French leader had never called for Europe to keep an equidistance from the United States and China. The French presidency said the United States are French allies and they share common values. During the visit, France and the Netherlands will sign a pact for innovation on Wednesday, focusing on cooperation in semiconductors, quantum physics and energy. They will also work to finalize a defense pact by 2024. Macron will have a state dinner with the King and Queen, see the hot ticket Johannes Vermeer exhibition at the Amsterdam Museum and meet Prime Minister Mark Rutte on a canal boat. The French leader delivers a speech on European sovereignty and security and economic matters at the Dutch Nexus Institute in The Hague to present a doctrine of economic security against China and the United States amid European unease over U.S. climate subsidies. The speech comes after Macron said in an interview with media that France did not want to depend on others on critical issues, citing energy, artificial intelligence and social networks. Macron's comments raised eyebrows on both sides of the Atlantic, with the Polish premier saying the alliance with the United States was an absolute foundation of European security. His visit is meant to highlight the new dynamic between Paris and The Hague after the turning point of Brexit. South Korea said on Tuesday that information contained in a purportedly leaked U.S. confidential document that appeared to be based on internal discussions among top South Korean security officials was untrue and altered. Several documents have been recently posted on social media offering a partial month-old snapshot of the war in Ukraine, sparking a diplomatic row between the US and some allies. One of the documents gave details of internal discussions among South Korean officials about US pressure on Seoul to help supply weapons to Ukraine, suggesting the US could have been spying on South Korea, one of its most important allies, and inviting condemnation from the Asian nation's lawmakers. The office of South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said in a statement that suspicions his office in Seoul was monitored are utterly false, and that any attempts to shake its alliance with the US is an act comprising national interests. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin held phone talks with South Korean counterpart on Tuesday, during which the two sides agreed that much of the documents on South Korea has been fabricated. A wildfire fueled by strong winds on Tuesday burned parts of a seaside city on South Korea's eastern coast, killing at least one person and forcing hundreds to flee before being slowed by rain. It took 8 hours and nearly 3,000 firefighters to put out the blaze that started on a mountain in a central part of Gwanong at around 8:30 local time and destroyed around 70 homes and other buildings. More than 500 people evacuated to facilities that included an ice skating arena and a middle school gym. The fire, which started at 8:30 a.m. local time, was mostly extinguished after consuming 170 acres of land and prompting the evacuation of hundreds of residents in a city of more than 200,000 people. The fire injured 3 people, including firefighters, and destroyed dozens of buildings, the National Forestry Agency said. A body was found later in the afternoon in a burnt house in the affected area. The fire appears to have started after strong winds blew a tree over onto a live overhead power cable, igniting flames. Firefighting crews had struggled to put out the blaze due to strong winds, but rains had soon tamped it down in the afternoon. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol had ordered officials to mobilize all available resources to put out the fire as soon as possible and evacuate nearby residents to minimize casualties. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry received on Monday a phone call from the U.S. climate envoy John Kerry. And in the phone call, the two sides agreed to enhance joint coordination during the next period based on the successful outcomes of the COP27, which was held last November with the aim of continuing the international climate action in different axes. The talks also tackled preparations for the upcoming COP28, which will take place in the UAE by the end of the year. Moving to business and finance, Ukraine has resumed electricity exports to Europe, its energy minister stated on Monday, after they were suspended in October when Russia began launching regular missile and drone attacks at critical energy infrastructure. The strikes caused sweeping power outages for civilians and industries, forcing workers to work overtime to try to repair the grid. The European Union is Ukraine's main export market for energy. In June 2022, Ukraine, which used to export power to Moldova, Hungary, Slovakia and Poland, said it was hoping to bring in 1.5 billion euros from electricity exports to the EU by the end of the year. The International Criminal Court's top prosecutor visited Ukraine in February to investigate Russia's airstrikes on the power grid. Kyiv says the attacks aimed to intimidate ordinary civilians, while Moscow said they were aimed at weakening the enemy's military. The Finance Minister Shinichi Suzuki said on Tuesday that Japan would chair a group of 7 G7 financial leaders meeting on April 12th in Washington to discuss the underlying global economy, global supply chains, inflation and the Ukraine crisis. Suzuki will travel to Washington to hold the G7 financial leaders meeting on the sidelines of IMF and World Bank annual gatherings. G7 groups: Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the United States, and Japan. Sweden's Electa, one of the country's largest pension funds, said Tuesday it was replacing its CEO after the fund lost almost 20 billion kroner from investments in crisis-hit U.S. banks. The fund announced in mid-March that it had lost 19.6 billion kroner as a result of its holdings of three bank-hit crises in the U.S., including Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and the First Republic. In early April, the fund announced it was replacing its head of equities and that it would be reducing the risk of having large stakes in private companies, far from Electa's home market. The dramatic collapse of SVB and shortly after Signature Bank in March unleashed turmoil across financial markets with fears of an international contagion. However, Swedish financial authorities have toned down the threat to Sweden's financial institutions and the country's financially supervisory authority, FI, saying that neither stability in the system nor future pensions had been affected to any noteworthy degree. The International Monetary Fund on Tuesday trimmed the 2023 global growth outlook slightly as higher interest rates cool activity, but warned that a severe flare-up of financial system turmoil could slash output to near recessionary levels. The IMF said in its latest World Economic Outlook report that banking system contagion risks were contained, but strong policy actions after the failure of two U.S. regional banks and the forced merger of Credit Suisse. But the turmoil added another layer of uncertainty on top of stubbornly high inflation and spillovers from Russia's war in Ukraine. The IMF is now forecasting global GDP growth at 2.8% for 2023 and 3% for 2024, marking a sharp slowdown from 3.4% in 2022 due to tighter monetary policy. Both the 2023 and 2024 forecasts were marked down by 0.1 percentage points from the estimates issued in January, partly due to weaker performances in some larger economies, as well as expectations of further monetary tightening to battle persistent inflation. The IMF's U.S. outlook improved slightly, with the growth in 2023 forecast at 1.6% versus 1.4%. But the fund cut forecasts for some major economies, including Germany, now forecast to contract 0.1%, and Japan forecast to grow 1.3% instead of 1.8%. In a plausible scenario, stress on vulnerable banks, some like failed Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, burdened by unrealized losses due to monetary policy tightening and reliant on uninsured deposits, creates a situation where funding conditions for all banks tighten. The fund also included a severe downside scenario with much broader impact from bank balance sheet risks leading to sharp cuts in lending in the U.S. and other advanced economies. The IMF forecasts do not include the impact of recent oil output cut by OPEC plus countries that has caused oil prices to spike. It assumes an average 2023 global oil price of $73 per barrel, while Monday's average was $84 a barrel. The top organization for the petroleum exporting countries, OPEC producer Saudi Arabia, along with other OPEC plus producers on Sunday, unexpectedly announced further oil output cuts of around 1.16 million barrels per day, which will start from May and last until the end of the year to surprise global oil markets and push up oil prices. The top organization for the petroleum exporting countries, producer with other producers, relayed this on Sunday. And the voluntary cuts will start in May and last until the end of the year, with the decision catching many analysts off guard. Oliver Klaus, the Dubai Bureau Chief of Energy Intelligence, a leading information company charting the energy sector, and Robin Mills, the CEO of Qamar Energy consultancy firm, expressed surprise. They said that with Russia promising to make its own oil cuts and China post-COVID-19 recovery continuing, the feeling was that oil demand was strong. Meanwhile, OPEC said in a statement that the move was a precautionary measure which sought to stabilize the market. Klaus said it was described by a Saudi energy official as a precautionary measure aimed at supporting the oil market. Saudi Arabia will lead with a voluntary cut of 500,000 barrels per day, while Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait, Algeria, Oman, Kazakhstan and Gabon will also participate in the cuts. Mills said they are described as voluntary cuts as each member has come out to be roughly in line with the proportions of its oil production. The reductions come on top of a 2 million barrel production cut announced by OPEC Plus last October, with analysts noting the increasing influence of Saudi Arabia. But the White House viewed these cuts as inadvisable and has argued for lower oil prices to support economic growth at a time of global uncertainty. And in the world of technology, Spain's data protection agency, AEPD, has asked Europe's Data Protection Committee to evaluate privacy concerns surrounding OpenAI, that intelligence chatbots, the agency, and Reuters on Tuesday after the software was temporarily in Italy. The AEPD understands the global processing operations that may have a significant impact on the rights of individuals, requiring decisions on a European level for spokesmen in the statement. And then this is going to take us to a break and moving on to the world of culture. Starting off with cultural news, China's Minister of Culture and Tourism, Ho Heipeng, expressed Beijing's keenness to enhance cooperation with Egypt in tourism and other fields. He started an official visit to Cairo, his first outside the country since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. In a meeting on Sunday with Egypt's Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, Ahmed Issa, who is heading an official delegation, stressed the depth of bilateral relations between the two countries. For his side, Issa emphasized to Heipeng that China represents one of the most promising markets for tourism in Egypt. In January, Egypt received its first batch of Chinese tourists after Beijing eased COVID-19 travel restrictions. Last week, Egypt eased visa requirements for Chinese nationals, allowing them to obtain visa upon entry. The Egyptian economy relies on tourism as a key sector for hard currency. The country's tourism sector was hard hit by COVID-19, with the number of visitors dropping from 13.1 million in 2019 to 3.7 million in 2020. However, the tourism sector began to recover in the last 2 years, with the number of tourists climbing it to 8 million in 2021 and again 11.7 million in 2022, with expectations of 15 million tourists visiting Egypt in 2023. And joining us over the phone is Dr. Mohammed Abdulaziz Beid, an Associate Professor of Tourism and Hotel Management.
Good evening to you.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Sir, can you tell us the significance or the importance of having a meeting to discuss promoting tourism to the Chinese citizens in Egypt and increasing the number of Chinese tourists?
Yes, of course. As a matter of China represents one of the most promising markets for the tourism to Egypt. In that field, I would like to say that His Excellency, the Minister of Tourism, has eased the visa requirement for China, and then they just take the visa at the end, and this was not happening before.
Yes, sir, what about the idea of looking to other non-traditional markets? I know that Europe has long been a traditional market for tourism in Egypt. Do you think that now Egypt is trying to expand within Asia, not just Chinese tourists, but across Asia?
As a matter of fact, yes, because we used not to expect tourists from China only. We are expecting tourism from Japan as well, from other countries. And I'm quite happy that this year is very promising for the tourism sector in Egypt. Most of the hotels are full, and the forecasting, which is taking place all over Egypt, I mean here in South Egypt, in the Red Sea area, and even Cairo, is very great, very promising this year.
Sir, there are reports that the Gem Museum will open within this year, most likely towards the end of the year of 2023. Do you expect that this will attract tourists and will expand the number of tourists entering into the country?
Of course, as a unique product all over the world, and I used to call it, if you allow me, that this will be the fourth pyramids for Egypt that will attract people from all other countries all over the world. And let me also say that Egypt is a favorite destination for everyone.
Yes.
Everyone to enjoy seeing being all over on beaches, on the Red Sea, and so on.
Okay, Dr. Mohammed Abdelaziz Abeid, an Associate Professor of Tourism and Hotel Management, thank you for joining us. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. In today's digital world, where the computer has taken over so many aspects of an artist's early role in visual communication, there has been a growing movement among talented young Danish illustrators who are working at an intersection of art and illustration. Here's more on this report.
In today's digital world, where the computer has taken over so many aspects of the artist's earlier role in visual communication, there has been a growing movement among talented young Danish illustrators who are working at the intersection of art and illustration. Initiated by Danish design agency White, the book was created with the desire to offer the selected artists a worthy platform for their work and talent. Dennis Miller, co-founder of White, says, quote, "We live in an age where digital graphics and photography has taken over large parts of artwork's prominent place in visual communication. Over the past few years, we have seen that this form of expression has seen a revival, a reinvention of analog techniques among young creatives. As graphic designers in a country where the creative industry is relatively clear, we encountered many of the talented people, and we think they should be seen and recognized." End quote. In addition to the beautiful and rich presentation of the selected works, each artist reveals the personal work process and creative considerations. This book emphasizes the importance of the process that underlies the illustrative technique, a technique and art form that is easily overlooked in the digital world, to point to a current renaissance in Denmark among young artistic talents who appreciate the analog craft design.
Moving to sports news with Al Ahly, where they were crowned the Egyptian Cup champions for the 38th time after defeating Pyramids 2-1 in the final on Monday at Al Salam Stadium. Pyramids' Walid El Karti signed first on the score sheet in the 72nd minute, while Al Ahly's Mahmoud Kahraba leveled the score in the 74th. Hamdi Fahmi added the winning goal for the Red Devils, and the Pyramids tried to win the title for the first time. Finally, Erling Haaland scored his 45th goal of the season as Manchester City took a commanding 3-0 first leg lead over Bayern Munich in the Champions League quarter-final on Tuesday. Rodri and Bernardo Silva were also on target for the English champions, who took a giant stride towards finally conquering Europe for the first time. Bayern boss Thomas Tuchel got the better of Guardiola and the City when Chelsea manager in 2021 final. But in 11 meetings between the two coaches, Guardiola has still only lost 3 times and got the better of his German counterpart in a heavyweight clash between the two favorites to win the competition. Well, this brings us to the end of the sports segment and this edition of Nile TV Newsroom Live. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more here on Nile TV.